On most lakes across the country, the summertime means really heavy vegetation, and today we're going to be discussing what lures and how to rig them to make sure that you're fishing these weed beds efficiently. Hi there, welcome to the Bass Fishing Life. I'm your host, Steve Rogers. Thank you for tuning into the channel where we're always learning, always growing, and enjoying the bass fishing life. Thank you so very much. Well, today we're going to discuss weed beds and specifically how to cover them efficiently so we get more bites and hopefully pull out some of those lunkers that are down there hiding. Now, in another video, I discussed what to look for in weed beds as far as deeper water access, little abnormalities or they're different, and I'll talk about that video at the end. But this one here is specifically going to be covering which lures cover a weed bed most efficiently, why, and some rigging techniques and processes to make sure you cover all the water column in these weed beds from those mid depths, the tops, all the way down to the bottom, and just pull out some of those nice lunker fish. Now, as far as lures, when you're fishing thick vegetation, it is best to use something that is streamlined. And the first one that we're going to talk about here is just a regular tube, very streamlined. This slips through the grass with ease. And the nice thing that I like about a tube in grass beds is you can fish it horizontally very easily, and then also fish it on the bottom very easily, so it covers all depths in the water column quickly, and you've got several different rigging options. I also want to mention that when you're fishing weed beds, it's real important just to keep mixing up size, and tubes come in a wide range of sizes. You've got great big flipping tubes all the way down to a traditional size tube, and then small little finesse tubes. So real quickly you can use the same type of bait but cover a range of sizes and see if it makes a difference in the way the bass react to it. Now, as far as rigging goes on a tube, if you've got some pretty thick stuff and you want to get down there to the bottom, I like to either use an insert flipping hook or a regular worm weight, but I make sure that I peg it. Both of those options will get you down to the bottom of the weed bed, especially in thick weeds. Now, if you're trying to swim it horizontally, it is surprising how well just a regular insert tube head works for this, even if it has an open hook. Now, naturally it works better through more sparse vegetation, but you can still swim it right through those weeds with pretty good success. And if you find yourself getting hung up on that open hook, well, that's a time to go ahead and use a more traditional Texas rig setup. But the tube is one of my favorites for all parts of the water column, top, mid, all the way down to the bottom, because it slides through the vegetation so easily and just has a really nice enticing fall to it. So that's probably one of my favorites right there for sure. As far as other streamlined lures, when you use a creature bait, and we know there are bazillions of creature bait variations out there in the marketplace, you want to choose one where the appendages are close to the body and it has that more streamlined approach. You're still going to get some water displacement and put out that vibration signature that can be so important to the lateral line on the bass. But if you notice this one here, and this is a structure bug, how it's very streamlined. It doesn't have the appendages that come way out. Another one, which is kind of a almost like a tube and a creature bait, is this punch bug here. It's not hollow like a tube, it is a solid body, but this is specifically designed for punching through very heavy matted vegetation. And you can see on this particular lure how it is not going to get hung up on those weeds, those little strands of weeds as it falls. It too is very streamlined. So as you're choosing your creature baits, you're digging through your tackle box, tackle collection, rummaging around in the boat, if you're going to focus on that heavy vegetation, make sure you pick one that's more streamlined, and you're going to get hung up way less and have a lot more success with it. Now, as far as the Texas rigging process, when you are getting ready to fish vegetation, and I've got a lure rigged up right here, a normal traditional Texas rig, okay, has got the sliding worm weight on there. When we're fishing the vegetation, that's not what we want most of the time, especially in the thicker vegetation. You're going to want to peg this worm weight onto your Texas rig, and on the market there's all kinds of great rubber pegs that you can slip through there and do a great job, or you can go old school like we did for years and take a toothpick and put it down in there and then snap the toothpick off. The toothpick is more likely to fray your line than obviously a rubber peg is, but boy, we use toothpicks for pegging weights for a long time. Another thing that you're going to want to do on the hook, so I'll pull this weight out of the way, is you're probably going to want to get a hook, a pin hook, or it's got a screw on it or something, because when you're fishing the grass efficiently, remember this whole video is about efficiency, you don't want this to slide down, get hung up on some vegetation and slide down the bend of that hook. Or you can do like I did on this one, and I just put a small dab of super glue up here to hold this in place. So if you don't have some of these hooks with the pin keepers on them, a small dot of super glue will work really well. Now this here is an extra wide gap hook. It's not a bad idea in the vegetation to use just an offset with more of that straighter shank to it. It's going to be more streamlined as well. But if you've got bulkier baits like this one here, this punch bug, well then you're probably going to have to go with the extra wide gap. But on this one here, I sure don't need an extra wide gap. This is what I had with me and what I put on there, but a regular offset would be even more streamlined. So make sure that you keep these weights pegged down there and keep your lure where it is going to be up there on the end of the hook with either super glue or a pin or something. And doing that, you're going to be so much more efficient when picking apart those weed beds. You're not going to have nearly as many wasted casts. And remember, when you're in the middle of that weed bed, targeting that vegetation, you want every cast to count. It's a game of percentages. The more that the lure stays properly presented, the better your odds of catching one. As far as the next type of lures for working through vegetation efficiently, I like to use jigs. Okay, your regular flipping and or pitching jigs, but you want to make sure that the head design is going to be one that slides through the grass nicely, like this particular one here. And you can see this actually is a skipping jig. It has a flatter side to it and a little bit heavier. This one works through the vegetation pretty good as well, but something like a football head does not cut through the vegetation as easily as a head design like this. So make sure when you're choosing those jig heads, you pick one that's going to slide down through that grass nicely. And I also like to have a variety of weights on my jigs. I'll go really light. This one's a 1/4 ounce. And then I might go clear up to 1 ounce. So why do I do that? Because I want to quickly adjust the fall rate. So I might have a 1/4 ounce rod, and I might have a rod with a 1 ounce on there. There have been, believe it or not, plenty of times where I get more bites fishing that 1 ounce, even in pretty shallow water, because when that jig hits, boom, it gets a little puff, a puff of silt, and it just draws the attention of the bass. And as that lure shoots down through the water column quickly, it kind of pulls that reaction strike as well. So adjust your jigs, lighter jigs, heavier jigs, see which one is getting the better bites so you can efficiently cover that weed bed quickly on your particular home lake or river. And the last lure that I use all the time on weed beds is a soft plastic jerkbait. Now notice this one is not a paddle tail, this is a straight tail. These lures just slide through the grass just so nicely and rarely get hung up, and you can rig them weightless and work through the top part of the water column. You could put a belly hook on here that's got a weight on it. You could Texas rig them with that pegged worm weight and cover down lower in the water column. So a soft plastic jerkbait is another excellent tool for efficiently covering those grass beds from top to bottom. Now let's talk about color here. When I'm working grass, vegetation, almost 100% of the time, I'm going with your greens, green pumpkins, your watermelons. I'm trying to match bluegills the best that I can, because bluegills just bunch up in the vegetation like crazy. You may say, well, on the soft jerkbait you had a more of a minnow style here, and I'll kind of alternate between the minnow coloration, but a lot of times I'll be throwing a watermelon soft jerkbait to try to match those bluegills as well. But if I run across a grass bed that's got a lot of fathead minnows busting through it, I'll go ahead and put on one like this. But matching that forage base is really important for working the grass. You'll see lots of pro anglers that got their grass flipping rods all set up, and every single lure across the board will be green pumpkin. If you've got yellow perch in your body of water, adding some chartreuse to it is an excellent idea, but 99% of the time I'm going with some shade of green. Now, as far as rods and reels, most of the time I'm going to go with a medium heavy power rated rod unless the vegetation is super thick, and then I will pull out that heavy power rating. But the medium heavy is just a really nice power rating for a variety of lures I'm going to throw in there, and working both horizontally and vertically. And if your water's got a little color to it, going straight braid, no doubt about it. Otherwise, I'm going to go braid to a leader. This is 50-pound braid, and on this particular one I have a 12-pound leader because the water here is very, very clear. But a lot of times I'll go to a 17-pound as well. So if it's got a little stain, like I said, straight braid is definitely my #1 choice. And on all my vegetation based rods and reels, I've got a high-speed reel on here. I want to make sure that when I'm done with the presentation, boom, I reel that back. When I'm fishing the vegetation, especially on the bottom, most of the time it's going to let it drop, just, you know, a bounce or two, a twitch, and then bring it right back and then put another one in there. So the high-speed reel is absolutely critical to get as many casts into my target area as possible. Now, the bite when you're fishing vegetation can be pretty interesting. Most of the time, it's just that slight little bump, and you go ahead and rear back and set the hook. But there are times, actually quite a few times, where I have gotten the bite and you see the line start to swim off, run off. That is an excellent indicator there are multiple fish in that same area. Bass will get in bunches and schools in vegetation. So if you see your line shooting off to one side, go ahead and land that fish, and then go ahead and pitch or cast right back to the exact same spot. You may have found a gold mine of nice fish, and you might catch 3, 4, 5, 10 in just a few minutes. So if the line runs, go ahead and throw back in there. There's a really good chance there's more in that particular area. I've had that happen so many times when I'm targeting grass beds. Well, I hope that this video helps you out and to cover these grass beds efficiently where your lures are not getting hung up. Maybe you got a couple different rods going with something working the mid depths and then something working all the way down on the bottom. It's so critically important. Put one down, pick up another one, and hit another part of that particular grass bed. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, I have a video that really talks about picking apart vegetation, what to look for, how to narrow down high percentage areas. So go ahead and check that one out right here. And hey, don't forget to go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.